Hi, guys. That was very dramatic. Thank you. Hi, guys. Hi. I hope everyone's having a wonderful NeoCon experience so far. There's been such incredible things to see all day and experience and to see old friends and meet new ones. So thank you for being here. I know it's been a long day, I'm sure. Just real quickly, I wanted to say hello, and I wanted to express my deep gratitude for this group of people on the stage. This was a project that we started a year ago, and it came out of an idea about we need to continue to strengthen the relationship between our valued industry partners and our beloved and respected designers within our community. And you know, as I get the privilege of speaking to both sides of the house a lot, and there's always a recurring theme about from our partners, our industry partners, saying, what is it that we need to do to better respond and equip our designers? And then the designers are always talking to me about how can we have better communications with our manufacturers and our partners to make it easier for us to do the work that we do. And so with that idea, we tapped two of our most incredible leaders, Royce and Teresa, who are the co-chair of this incredible panel, and that started this initiative that's been a year long, and this is a summary of the things that they got together to speak about. I know Royce threatened me not to introduce anyone, so I'm not going to, but I do want to say this is a part of the group of 10 by 10 that came together throughout the year to discuss some the things that they're going to talk about today. So thank you. And then I also wanted to say thank you to Shane, who is our staff liaison, who was behind the scenes that made all this happen. So thank you for being here. Enjoy this. You guys, thank you so much for your incredible work.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I already have laryngitis, so apologies. So I'm Royce Epstein. I'm Senior Director of Design Insights at Mohawk Group, and I am co-chair of the ASID by 10 Collective. I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves, so we'll just...
I'm Teresa Humphrey, Director of Commercial Specifications at Wilson Art, and I am the other co-chair.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Lefebvre. I work at Canon Design. I am one of interior design leaders, and I work out of our Buffalo office in upstate New York.
Joanne Tuco-Rogadio, I'm Senior Interior Designer at Teeter. I cover about 4 offices, and we're located in Central Valley of California.
Haley Nelson, Design Director with IA Interior Architects in Austin.
Jess Collins, Principal and Design Director at HOK in Dallas.
And I'm Faraz Shah. I'm the Brand Director at Turf Design, and we're based here in Chicago.
Everyone knows Faraz.
Yeah. So Coy gave you a little bit of perspective, but I'll give you a bigger overview. So in 2024, ASID launched this groundbreaking initiative that brought together 10 interior designers and 10 industry partners in 5 key sectors, which was live, work, learn, and play. And the goal from these groups was to create meaningful dialogue and conversations that often get lost between billable hours and product-focused conversations and tight deadlines. And this forward-thinking effort acknowledged that the built environment impacts not only the end users, but also the designers shaping these spaces and the developments of the products that they specify. To spark the fresh thinking and encourage diverse perspectives, the 20 participants, that was a total of 20 plus Royce and I and Shane, were divided into 2 working groups, A and B, and each tasked with exploring shared themes. And with that, Royce, I'll hand it over to you to share more about the themes and the journey the groups took.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. So for 2024, we decided to work on 2 themes, inclusivity and connectivity. And this was a theme that ASID as a whole was very interested in dissecting and all of the work that they're doing cross-industry. So we thought it was wonderful to kind of tag on to the topics they're already thinking about and talking about with all the other groups and committees. But again, because we have a unique spin with our group of being, half interior designers and half industry partners who are thought leaders, we wanted to really come together and dig deep. So we really dug deep, and I think you'll get a sense of how wonderful our group is because we're honest with each other. We talk about things that maybe haven't been talked about in our industry, and we're all here to move the needle and bring our industry forward with this topic, among others. I will say, too, we're already, all of us are on the 2025 ASID by 10 collective as well. So that's another topic. We'll hopefully present that next year, so come back. But for this year, connectivity and inclusivity, we're going to just jump right in. So I'm going to direct questions, and Teresa will direct questions to individual designers here, and anyone can then chime in, and you'll see how robust this conversation is going to go. Okay, so I'm going to start with Suzanne. How does connectivity affect design today?
Well, first I want to thank everybody also in the ASID because this was a really amazing experience. I think we can all, we came into this without really any expectations or knowing what we were going to be doing because it was the first time. So it was really great to meet monthly and develop conversations and peer discussions and friendships through this and making us better designers. So thank you for that. So when we're talking about the big movement, and I think after all of the discussions monthly, we actually came out of this feeling like redefining how we look at design, specifically interior design, and moving away from maybe more static structure and how we approach design, whether that's in programming or even earlier on, to more emotionally resonant spaces, looking at spaces that make people feel welcome and safe, as well as having awe and wonderment as well. But it's really important, we're talking through this, that it goes back beyond the building. How do we look at spaces beyond what we're just designing and programming, and looking at the community, social impact, and making sure also that when we are meeting with stakeholders and end users, do we have all of the right people in the room? So sometimes it's an uncomfortable conversation, sometimes it's eye-opening, but it's a respectful conversation early on with your client to make sure that you do have the right people. We don't always have to select our stakeholders and end users, so we want to make sure we have a cross-section of the right people there because I'll use education as an example. What's happening beyond the school with the students, what's happening at their home before they get to school, after school, are they taking care of parents, are they taking care of siblings? That can go up to higher education, commuting, so making sure you're asking those questions. I know we all do visioning and workshopping, and that's the really big piece of how we design, specifically at Canon as well, is that we really take that moment and strategize and making sure beyond just the great tools that we have in visioning, but making sure we're asking those questions and leading our clients through maybe some difficult conversations. It could even touch into policy. It could touch outside of the school that you're working for, or making sure that there's community involved as well. That's a big one.
Does anybody want to add anything?
I think it's interesting too, like when we were doing this, we actually had to rewind the clock. When we were first going through this exercise together, I think being post-pandemic was still very fresh for a lot of the conversation. And I think, when you're touching on connectivity, like when you were referencing even on the education side, it was within the our industry, right, and mentorship. And I think we were understanding a little bit more that we had to be more purposeful and intentional about connecting back with the younger group of designers that are coming up and sharing some of those insights and knowledge that some of the more experienced designers have had, and realizing that there's some challenges, both just the nature of our industry and like how we're all educated, nature of the workplace, nature of how we're all able to actually interact. And I think there was a lot of really interesting discussion around that, where I think creating the space just among ourselves as peers to be able to acknowledge those dialogues, and then also be able to be really intentional about connecting back with the younger students that are coming up. But it was interesting to see how that goes back to just whiplash from being in that pandemic environment where like everyone's totally isolated. Like there's so much, I think, eagerness to get back and be in person.
I think it really tapped into just the shared humanity of wanting that sense of connectivity and belonging, and something that, can often be missed when we're apart, right? And so there's that human desire to be together. But also part of the charge of this group, which was really fascinating, was the idea that we were representing different segments. So we had the live, work, learn, play, heal, as you heard, but what was fascinating was how much it overlapped. There was a blurriness to all of those segments, and we realized that connectivity and inclusivity were such an intentional sort of part of all of those in unique ways, but it became very blurry, which was really unique, that we kind of thought, well, we're going to approach this sort of systematically and explore these different swim lanes, if you will, but there was so much overlap in those shared experiences amongst those different dimensions of just how we show up as humans.
I'm glad you shared that. And as a moderator, it was really hard each month to like sit on these virtual meetings with them, and I'm not supposed to give input, but this is really hard. But on the panel, I'm just going to talk. But it was fun to watch the designers and the manufacturers, because that symbiotic relationship of the designers are designing for this in those 5 spaces, but the manufacturers are also having those same conversations in their manufacturing built environment of how they create the products that go into those spaces. So watching those conversations between the two dialogues on those, it was really fascinating, and it helped be able to craft the white paper over those 5 months. So that was something probably we should have shared, is they met virtually. They didn't know each other for 1 hour a month for 4 months, and then came together at ASID Gather and met in person for the first time, and had 4 hours to then create their presentation. And Group A presented to B, B presented to A, and we walked away and came up with this beautiful, like, final product that was just, I felt brilliant. So it was really cool.
Thanks for bringing up the white paper. That's me. I'm totally negligent that I didn't say that. So the white paper basically is all the findings from Group A and Group B, but then all the commonalities were amazing to see between the two groups. So there is a QR code on the screen, and at the end of this, you can get your scan going, and it will take you right to the landing page for ASID where this white paper is living. And this is the debut today at this moment of the white paper. So we're really happy and proud that we could get this information out there. And it's really less data driven. A lot of this is very lived experience from each one of these members of the collective, from what they practice in their firms, what they practice with their clients, what we go through as manufacturers. So we're really just happy that this could launch today for all of you. And again, this will be something that we hope to do on an annual basis. So, Teresa's got the next one.
All right, so Jessica, how can inclusivity create positive impacts through design?
I mean, how can it not? Like, can we all just acknowledge just for a second that if you are designing inclusively, congratulations, you're a better person, right? Like, our moral obligation as designers and as creators of space should be to create spaces that are inclusive, right? And that are, like we talked about, safe and welcoming and engaging and supportive and motivating for all. Our brilliant colleague, Kay Sargent, always uses this example, so I've stolen it forever. Think about the curb cut, right? Like, you're at a corner, there's a big curb. They created this curb cut that drops the sidewalk down so that you can easily get, let's say you're wheelchair bound, you can easily get from the elevated sidewalk to the street. You'll also see tactile dots if you're vision impaired, right? To help you cross the street safely at a crosswalk. Well, the curb cut, yes, it is absolutely meant and made for somebody that is wheelchair bound, but it also helps everybody else in the community too. If you're on a bike, if you have luggage, if you have a stroller, if you have a cart, right? There are these things that I think we take for granted when we think like, oh, well, that's code required, or, oh, I have to do it because, this, BIFMA is requiring it, right? But it's good for everybody, and it's just really good design. So I think, first of all, why wouldn't we design inclusively is my first thought. But then I think, kind of what we've all been touching on so far, inclusive design really doesn't just look at things from an aesthetics perspective, or yes, I'm checking the box and I've, met all of my code requirements, but when we think about how people feel in the space, like Suzanne was starting to touch on, I think it really just creates spaces where people can thrive. And there's absolutely a business case, bottom line, return on investment piece of this that is really easy to actually sell to our clients, that maybe only, I only have matter in the right side of my brain, but some clients that might be CFOs or, executives, they have brain matter on the left side of their head, and they think about cost, right? And budget, and how can I get the best and the most out of my teams? And when you explain to them, if we're designing inclusively, and if we're designing spaces regardless of which of these 5 sectors or any other sectors, if we're designing spaces that are inclusive, we have data that shows that people are better at their jobs, and they're happier, and they stay at a company longer, right? We know from this data too, that if there's a team that's doing really innovative work, they actually can come up with bigger, better, brighter ideas if they feel seen, heard, supported, and safe, right? So less sick days, less quiet quitting, your people are happier, they don't leave, you don't have to fire them, right? It's like there's this business case for inclusive, supportive, motivating environments that, yes, it gets into a lot of design psychology, which obviously we're all obsessed with because we can't stop talking about it, but it's just like a good business case, and it's just the right thing to do, because ultimately, like, we are all in the service industry, and we all serve others, and we all want to make other people's lives better, and that's, yes, we're making things look nice at the same time, but we're here to serve others and make lives better, and so I think inclusive design it really needs to not be an option.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting though too, is that I don't think everyone's even thinking about it, right? Like you were talking about, like it makes you a better person, right? Like you're a better designer, but I think even just getting to that first point of like actually thinking about like, am I designing for someone or am I excluding someone? Like just having that first question is probably already better than most designers, right?
Right. And not having solutions without listening first.
Yeah.
Like not going into it with the solutions already.
Yep.
Because we all have a tendency sometimes to have this, big idea, but we haven't listened or heard everybody yet.
And you can simplify the question, am I helping or harming? Like it could literally be that sort of,
Well, you have your preconceived ideas, that's from you and your cultural upbringing, and you have to, be listening to others that may not be similar at all to what you're doing. But you made me just think of something too, like beyond the, so using the space, you were thinking like bottom line. Well, what else can the space do? We talked about that. So that community piece is what else can that building serve? You have this piece of it, but it can serve other uses. That's the beyond the building and reaching out. That it could be dual purpose. It can offer things that you didn't predict in the beginning. That's when you go through all of your visioning and pulling all this information, and then you could end up with this building that's really active and it's fluid. So it keeps evolving as time goes on, and it's not this static. And maybe it was a workplace at one point, but it's probably going to evolve into something else or a school or something. So coming into that frame of mind, I think it's also, as designers, it's more fun actually too.
Yeah. The discussion's all kind of flooding back now, right?
Yeah, you're like, oh, that's what we talked about.
That's what we talked about.
But yeah, it's really exciting to go into into a design thinking of all the other possibilities.
Yeah.
So.
You're on call 2 from April of 2024. Think back.
Yep. I mean, I think you're exactly right though. Like where this isn't static, right? Like it's not static over time. It's not static even during the day, right? And I think that there's a lot more nuance that needs to be, I think, considered in the design of a building or, individual spaces within it. Where I think what we were talking about was choice, and this goes back to like the inclusivity part of this, right? By designing with inclusivity, you may be actually going and excluding an audience, and I think that's okay, so long as you're intentional about it, and you're acknowledging and understanding the impact of your design choices and what it's going to have on those audiences, right? Whether it's the people that you intend to help, or maybe some other people that you may be putting at a disadvantage. But by having some of those choices made, hopefully you're creating space or options for multiple groups. You know, I think particularly in the workplace, right? Like we've been talking about designing for senses, and you know, you think about like all of the ways that you can contribute to that through light, through texture, like visual elements, and even though there's a lot of sight bias, even like touch and smell, like these are all really important considerations that everyone has to make when they're designing a space to hopefully support a very productive environment for someone, or to heal, right? Or to play, right? Like all of those attributes that we've been talking about, I think it's just really important to be intentional with it. You know?
I just wanted to also add in furniture, I didn't realize is that designing NPRs where kids gather around, even the tables, like where our original desk, right, was you get a table with only 8 chairs. You're already teaching children to exclude other people by just assuming that you could only fit 8 people in here. But now we're designing, you know, a lot of the NPRs with tables where you could have loose furniture, so anyone in your group could sit, no matter how many people there are. So that's also another thinking that I like to include in inclusivity. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. I kind of want to hit on something, Suzanne, you were talking about, and I think about this a lot, especially when with this return to work movement that's still in flux. You know, some people only go back to the office 2 days a week. So what's happening the other 5 days a week, right? Like, you know, could the community be using this space? Could other organizations come in and be using this space? And those spaces are not programmed for that quite yet.
No.
Right, so I think that's something when we were talking about kind of expanding the definition of design, it's also expanding the program and expanding the, like, you know, the case for the building.
Yeah, and are you having those conversations? It's hard because, you know, we have clients, sometimes we have very progressive clients. They're just want to, you know, they hire us to go as far as we can go, and some are more conservative and institutional and have standards. And so are you having those conversations earlier on? We have, you know, we get a proposal, we, you know, we're awarded it, and then you have the program, but there's, I think we are allowed to kind of ask those questions to the client, making sure that if we're not hearing the information we're getting, can we go and talk to them about maybe there's someone else or there's other people that can we bring them to the table and start, you know, asking those questions.
And I think a lot of end users probably haven't thought about all the scenarios that could be happening.
Yeah.
I think that's actually really good. I remember during our discussion in Denver, like you had brought up some interesting points about like teaching the client, right? Like educating them on how to ask and consider these things. I don't know, maybe you can talk some more about that.
Oh.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Do you remember that a year ago?
Right.
Yeah, right. You remember that a year ago?
I mean, that's for all. I mean, they hire us because, you know, we're experts, but we're also learning from them quite a bit. So, you know, I'm not a teacher in the sense of a K through 12. I learn a lot from working with them, but, you know, they also rely on us to kind of bring solutions that maybe they hadn't thought about. Maybe they're so used to working in one, we are all used to this, right? They're all used to working in a certain way, and we have to kind of shepherd them sometimes to think about another possibility of working or teaching or healing. You know, and so it's a give and take. It's not always but it is enjoyable. It's not the easiest part always to kind of, you know, lead them down a road that they may not be comfortable with, but in the end, it makes for such a better experience, and they may not do it. So there's that part too, that we don't always design everything that, you know, we plan to. It has to be, you know, it's measured, and there's budgets and time frames. So.
An equal relationship of pulling yourselves out of your boundaries, both on their side and yours, just to figure out.
I've been on the client side, right, where working with you know, interior designers and architects, and they've had to educate us about how to be considerate about, you know, certain colors or different like finishes that are going to a space, and, you know, considerations that we just either aren't entering into our brain or we're distracted by other things. And so it's a really helpful, I think, relationship to be able to have with your design partners, that they can teach us on the client side how to be better stewards of our space.
Yeah, and having expertise, if I don't know it, I'm going to go to somebody else in a different market. So it's the cross-cutting too, of making sure in schools, make sure we bring our behavioral health specialists. We want to make sure that we're cross-cutting and bringing in the right people to guide that client. It may not have been planned earlier on, but we don't not do it if we feel like it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. So we touched on remote work, so now I'm gonna lob the next question to Haley because she spent a lot of time doing some remote work. And I feel like you are the best person to answer this question. So how is remote work affecting connectivity and inclusivity?
Yeah, so as Faraz mentioned, we were right kind of in the post-pandemic conversation. And really it is the world of work where we are today, right? So what was really interesting about this whole thought experiment was the duality of us representing not only the expertise that we're sort of bringing to our clients, right? But we were also representing our own lived experience as humans and as going through this collective, world experience together. And so the reality of remote or hybrid work is part of today's conversation, right? So that was really fascinating. I'll just kind of plug that in here too as part of this collective was the fact that we were sort of representing that duality of humans ourselves going through this, but also the expertise we're bringing to our clients. So as my lived experience, I have focused on workplace design for my entire career, but I did transition to a remote position and I was working fully remote for about a year and a half. And it's a really interesting experiment to be a workplace designer without a workplace. But it was really fascinating to sort of see why it worked or didn't work. It was really successful for me because at that moment in time, I had a role where it was appropriate for me to be remote. I was responsible for shepherding a team that was across the country, working on projects in different locations, and so my work was sort of everywhere, so I could be anywhere. But it also was successful because of the relationships that I had built before I transitioned to remote. So I knew the company, I knew my teammates, so that made that really successful, kind of having that foundation. But what was also really interesting about that experiment was that it also proved that I could build and nurture relationships virtually. So it was kind of that empathetic aha that, going through that, we like to say, oh, we need people to be in person because that's the only way it works. But we've talked a lot about intention, and I think that was what made that successful. When you're interacting with new people, we even mentioned, our group first was meeting all virtually, and it does take more time. It takes some intention. It takes, really investing in getting to know people, and that is repetitive over time. So it's slower to build those bonds, but it is possible. And then it's only amplified when you do have those in-person moments to really kind of coalesce together around that. So anyway, that was my kind of personal perspective coming at it from working remote. Because it worked for that moment in time, now I am back to fully in person, so it's kind of being able to see both sides of that coin. I love being able to just work with my team and see them every day and, building on those connections. But having had that experience just offered, another perspective that many of our clients are, experiencing that are in different lines of work, right? Where honestly, even the industry partners sort of side of our collective, it was really fascinating to hear their lived experience of primarily being remote and sort of always on the go and where we needed them to be to meet us as their customers, right? So building that shared sense of empathy, I think, was really valuable to the remote work part of the conversation.
I realized the other day, a lot of my reps already knew my home address and where I lived because, they also came to my wedding, right?
You're just that kind of person.
Yeah, I'm just that kind of person. But I realized the other day, I was like, oh, every single industry partner that I had over COVID knows where I live and has my address because they dropped off all of the samples to my front porch. So it's like, hi, this is the first time we're working together. Welcome to my 1947 teardown. Please don't judge me. You know what I mean? Like we were all we all experience collective trauma. We talk a lot about trauma-informed design in behavioral health, in healthcare settings, in justice settings, but we all lived this collective trauma, and trauma isn't always seen, right? Sometimes it's you can't see it on the surface, but I thought about that the other day. I was like, wow, we were having like a really serious lived human experience all together. And I love that we keep talking about empathy, because I think the biggest piece for me when I think about inclusivity and advancing inclusive design is starting with empathy and not with assumptions, like you were saying.
Yeah, and a big piece, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit, was the education piece. So I remember, I think that was our first month. Was that the first topic? Or something was about, or we made it into it, or it evolved from.
We had a topic and we didn't stay on track. Yeah.
It was.
Designers do that?
It was.
They set no ground rules for this.
That is true.
Post-pandemic, and then what was changing? Mentoring, guiding, and recruiting.
Yes.
So all of this is actually from months of, we were talking about CA, we were talking about general contractors, we were talking about being in the field. So it wasn't also, I mean, it was also very gritty kind of day-to-day that came up with all of this. But I think the education piece of it is extremely important. I am an adjunct when I have time. I've taught professional practice to interior designers, and we were talking about, and maybe you can chime in too about the remote piece of it. But we all, I mean, I have young designers. Their preference is to be in the office and to work, and we welcome it. But a bigger piece of this is more on the education side of the empathy and trauma. And some of these, what I've noticed is a lot of the students have these issues or coping skills or needing coping skills. So, but we also want to maybe bring that into how they're going to be working with clients. So it's this double side of the education where we need them to be uncomfortable, to be comfortable, to be uncomfortable, and then to also be able to do that with their clients as well. So that, I mean, that could be a whole topic itself.
Maybe next year.
2026,
So-
write it down.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really interesting. I mean, both of you guys, like, we had this shared human experience, right? And I think it affected a certain generation very differently because, you know, for a lot of us, right, we had been practicing and working, you know, various numbers of years before this all happened, and then there's a whole other generation that's just coming into the workforce, right? Whether they were finishing school remotely because of this, or they were just entering the workforce remotely, they had a completely different expectation of what design and camaraderie and like the relationships even with the reps is supposed
The
to
materials, the
Big
touch, the
time.
samples, yeah.
I have to tell my younger staff to, can you please just call them? Stop emailing
Oh my God,
them.
right?
Pick up the phone, there's this thing, call them please.
Yeah.
Well, and that's an interesting point
That's the
with connectivity
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to connect in a more humane way? I mean, email is not really humane. Just like we all can read an email and take it 3 different ways. You know, we get paranoid. Are they yelling at me in the email? Or are they happy with me in the email? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great point, Joanne, too. Like sometimes going back to basics is almost like the best thing to do because you can get on level with someone.
I think in some of our group discussions, right, like that generational shift was, I think it started out as like, oh my God, like this younger generation, like what are they doing? Like, but then I think that changed a little bit and the conversation turned to, I think, just more of an acknowledgement that it's different. It's not necessarily worse or that,
Yeah, you
our
were a
generation-
pro techno. I mean, you were.
Yeah.
No, you are.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Like, there's a lot to learn from the younger generation. I think, but it's that dialogue, right? Like having that conversation, you know, whether it's in person or remote, but being really focused on listening and being able to take that from the next generation, hopefully, like uplifting us all, right? And I think that that's a really interesting place to be, where you have such distinct experiences that maybe for, I don't know how long this lasts, but like there's this little snapshot in time right now where there is such a distinct experience of that younger generation that's early in their career now.
Yeah, but I think also just leaning into the curiosity of how different people like to communicate and being inclusive and supportive of that too. You know, I think it's easy to make generalizations of kind of one way, but recognizing not only our designers, you know, growing up in this generation, industry partners, our clients, right? Everyone is sort of experiencing the world together. So if there are new ways of communicating and sort of getting to that common ground, that we have to stay curious about it too. So I think it goes both ways of, protecting the humanity and maybe some of the things that worked well in our experience, but also being curious and understanding how new ways of connecting, are valued by the
I
next
would like to
generation.
stop that ordering samples in your Instagram DM. That would be good.
Just to clear up your
Like
DMs.
text is a
Don't be
real
that
way of
curious.
communication
Yeah,
now.
it really
Wait,
is.
does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, not to me, but
I'm going
to
to send
our
you one
reps.
just as a joke and see what happens.
Yeah,
We did have a LinkedIn request for a bag yesterday. But
a LinkedIn request. Yeah.
Love it.
So
Okay.
that's making the assumption that people are in their Instagram all the time, when of course many people aren't. So there's that too.
Awesome. I think this is a great segue to Joanne, because your question is big and broad and beautiful, because it's like, what were the major insights from your group? Like, not one specific, like,
Yes.
encompassing of everything. What were the major takeaways?
Yeah, definitely. For one, it made me reflect a lot on myself of just as a designer, moving from San Francisco into a smaller town, and how much access of the design community I had living in San Francisco. So that was one topic that I kept thinking about. And another one was that how important our relationship with our industry partners are, that without them, how would we know new products popping up? Research valuable for my projects. And a lot of my industry partners are like my lifelong friends, like this crew here. And another thing was a subject that we talked about a lot was, does the younger generation understand how valuable those relationships are?
Yes.
And how do we teach them that? Because I feel like sometimes please call them, make an appointment.
Oh, we do. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. And so those are kind of the topics, and pandemic was definitely still fresh, and remote work was a big topic again during our group, and how it was really hard to make authentic connections with each other because of technology. Like, we're just in this business of being busy all the time, and forced to multitask. And I'm a culprit of it too, just by being on Teams, and I'm like, oh, I'm not presenting, so I'm gonna be working at the same time. So it was just, that topic came up a lot during our conversation of constantly multitasking. But I am a big advocate for remote work, just because I'm a mom. And before remote work, I used to call myself a weekend mom, because I would leave, to go to work really early, come home really late, and I only saw my son in the weekends, so, which is sad. But because of remote work, pandemic hit, I really got to spend a lot of time with my son. We took him to soccer practice a lot, but I still thrived as a designer, which was really hard for us women, because we normally have to choose between our family or work. And I wanted to be that person, to be a mentor to other moms and parents out there, that we could do this. We could be a mom and still be a parent at the same time. So, but going back to our group, when we finally, I know, I'm gonna cry, sorry. Going back to our group, when we met in Denver, it was really amazing because we finally saw each other. And then that's like the power of that, in-person meeting and really having that authentic connection. So it was really great hugging everybody.
Yeah, we didn't want to.
Hey.
We didn't want it to end.
And we pushed ourselves more. I think at the end, like you and I presented at the end, and we just kind of we didn't change it, but we just kind of went this.
Oh, yeah.
We did.
Yep.
And I'm not going to say everything. I know there's going to be
There's a white paper.
there's a paper coming. But a big piece of it was the emotional piece, right?
Yeah.
That was the big, designing outside of the building, beyond the building, the emotional piece of it, and the storytelling. So while that is, a huge piece of how we design, the experience of it. I mean, going into your showroom.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. I mean, could be uncomfortable. It could be comfortable. I mean, it's dark. There's smells. There's sound.
They're good smells. They're good smells.
There's smells.
There is. Yes. Sorry, wrong word. But
We got you.
it's beautiful, and it opens up, and then there's bright, and there's dark. There's all of these things happening that could work for some people. It may not work for other people. It's this whole piece of it, and storytelling is a huge piece of what we do. And it's not always designing shock and awe all the time. It could just be making sure that the experience, you're developing the story from the end users. You're taking their stories and then developing and narrating something for them through space. And so weaving that in, we talked a lot about the experiential piece and just, I wrote that piece on the theater, how you weave theater and into maybe interior design, but it doesn't always have to be these big wonders. It could be a very quiet space. It could be a space that holds people when they need to be held. And so there's that piece of it, and that's what we enjoy the most.
I feel like sensory was brought into
Yes.
our group, like
Yes.
y'all's group. I was,
You were part of it.
yeah,
You can take credit.
I want to be part.
No.
But like sensory was that connectivity, inclusivity because of the sense, not smell, taste, touch. Like that is inclusivity and connectivity.
Yes.
But that's the human piece that I feel like we've all been missing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Suzanne, Jess, and Faraz were on a group. We should have probably prefaced that too. And so their group really focused on that big picture storytelling that Suzanne just kind of set the stage for. And Joanne and I were on the same group. We've got some other members in the audience. And ours kind of naturally became a nice complement to what Group A was discussing, because we kind of broke that down. We called it a recipe. You'll see it in the white paper. But seeing those commonalities across all of those different segments and how we really have a lot of common ingredients. And I think that's the reminder to all of you, and the power that you have is that we've got these common ingredients, the tools in our toolbox to really support asking the right questions, really understanding who are we forgetting? What are we asking the right people? If we don't have access to them, can we imagine a persona or an archetype and what they might be? Sort of bringing to that situation. And so in creating those recipes, we found what are those sort of unique ingredients that were important for some of these different segments. So it really became a nice complement and a full story when we all presented together, which was nice.
And asking, are you sure? Okay.
Do it.
I'm gonna do it. Asking those important questions, we think we've covered it all, right? But I heard recently, and I probably stole it from one of you, actually. I can't remember where I heard this. But somebody said, okay, you have a client, and let's say it's a workplace client, but this could work for any sector. And you're talking to them about their current space and what they love and what they hate, right? Sometimes we call it keep, toss, fix, create. What do you want to never see again? What are you obsessed with that you want to have forever, right? We talk about space types. So a different way of asking those same questions of keep, toss, fix, create is, tell me about your favorite space in your facility, in your school, in your place of worship, whatever it is. And let's go in there together and let's experience that space and tell me specifically what you love about that space. And then let's figure out how to replicate those same things, which are usually not obvious, right? And the client might have to sit there and they might bring in all of their change champions or their steering committee or random, team members and say well, you guys are always in this room. Why are you so obsessed with this room? And it's well, because the carpet's amazing, or because the acoustics sound really good.
Technology works.
Yeah, or because the technology works. Or because I'm hyposensitive or I'm hypersensitive and I need more or less auditory visual stimulation, right? So find those pieces that really make that space sing, that make people feel good as humans. Again, basic human needs. How are we making humans happy in space, right? And then how can we replicate those, maybe at different scales, across their entire palette of postures, right? And we know that when we design for one, we design for none. So knowing that people experience space differently, maybe somebody loves your showroom, maybe they can't go in, right? That's okay, but acknowledging the fact that we might need a very, very broad spectrum that can be, accommodating for all, which I know is a really big ask, but just
You're spot on.
spinning that question to get at the actual piece is so fascinating to me. I mean, it's all psychology, but it's so cool.
No, I think you're absolutely right. You're never going to, I think it's, maybe it's impossible, highly improbable to find a space that works for everybody all the time. It's just not, it's an exercise in futility. But being able to provide the options and choice and listening to be able to even educate yourself to be able to get to that initial concept that might resonate with more than one person, I think it's great.
So Jess, that was a really great actionable step that our fellow design community can think about on their projects. So what are some other actionable things that we can recommend to everybody out there from our learnings?
I think for me, coming into this, it was ask yourself, who am I designing for? Who am I excluding? And just ask, like, just start with that, right? I think it doesn't mean that you have to have the answer to everything. It doesn't mean that you have to consider every population, but just be intentional about at least one thing. And I think you're already going to be better off than where you were before.
It's beautiful.
Look, what I said earlier is being comfortable with, if you're getting the sense that you're not getting the information you need from your client, maybe you have to have that conversation of, is there somebody else out there? Is there someone that you trust where you can just guide them and put in a positive way that you'd really like to find out more information in this way? And I think everyone should feel comfortable, and it's not just they come and like, these are your 4 people, you're going to be talking to them and no one else. I think you can ask the question, it won't hurt, and kind of push the client a little bit more to maybe step out of their comfort zone.
I was going to say, for me, it's in the beginning, I was like, what is my responsibility to bring inclusive design into spaces? But now, after speaking with everybody and doing more research, it's like, it is our responsibility as designers, even when the clients don't ask for it, So
Yeah.
I think it's time to start just saying it.
Yeah, I think recognizing that space is one part of the equation. And so, we've talked about leaning into the curiosity, asking questions. So having that dialogue and building the relationship with your clients is definitely a start to the conversation, but recognizing that space is going to support behaviors. So what are the behaviors that you're trying to promote to support inclusivity and connectivity? Is it about getting people to run into each other from different departments? What's the question we're really solving? So I think really understanding what it is we're solving for, and every project type is going to be different depending on what you're doing, but making time to recognize that there are behaviors associated with inclusivity and connectivity that you're trying to design for, and making sure we've got clarity on what those are, because the places that you're designing are going to support those behaviors, and then those behaviors over time are going to build a culture of inclusivity and connectivity.
That's a wonderful, let's put an exclamation point on that. That was excellent. I think we have time for one more question for the group, and then we're going to shift to Q&A. So Teresa, you can pick, we have a few questions here. You can pick the last one. You pick.
I mean,
Dealer's
I
choice.
really, what are your personal reflections on the experience? What was your biggest aha takeaway?
I just loved the dialogue between designers and industry partners. I think we've kind of danced around this, but the idea that we can have these deep conversations, it's not something you have to kind of keep protected in our own sort of firm conversations or just amongst, sort of the design community, but inviting a broader audience into the conversation has been so rewarding, and just being able to see from the manufacturing side what goes into the products, that ultimately we're specifying. We can have a better dialogue. They're seeing needs, we're seeing needs, and coming together was such a wonderful opportunity. I think, this collective, just being able to have that time for dialogue and recognizing that that's a really important part of, and sort of an untapped, part of our industry, that we really should leverage each other as a community more. So I loved that.
Yeah.
I think the biggest piece was the ASID there wasn't an outcome. All right, yes, the connectivity, inclusivity, that was the theme, but we were really allowed to kind of just shape it. Yeah. And at the end, it just evolved. It really evolved from talking about construction all the way to how are we defining design now. It went this full spectrum, and so it was a safe place to talk. It was idea exchange. It was kind of liberating. And it just made us better. And I brought it back to the firm. And so it was just a really delight to do it.
That's a great question.
Awesome.
Like, did you guys bring this information. And
Well,
the
we had to
nuggets
keep
you
it a lot
learned.
of.
I was about to say we weren't allowed to until today.
That's fair.
I
that's
mean,
fair.
but we didn't do. I didn't do a presentation, but it's definitely ingrained. It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it's makes me feel more comfortable, and I also know that when I am having those conversations with a client, that I'm like, yeah, I got 10 other people, 20 other people behind me
Yeah.
that say the same. feel the
Sorry, I just banged my microphone. I grabbed my heart because that is such, that's what we wanted, right?
confidence.
That's what we wanted for,
Even if they're not receptive, you still feel like you've done the right.
all the outcomes mentioned thus far have been spectacular.
And we're all talking about this at our firms in a million different ways. It's like the neuro-inclusive piece, which, we've been focused on. The whole point of this is that it should not be kept sacrosanct, like, oh, well, HOK can't share any of this. It's like, if we could just all be talking about it together and all jumping on the bandwagon, like, there's no reason why any of this should be kept secret, right? It's like we all want to build a better world that makes people's lives better. So the more we can share, the more knowledge we can share, the more, if there are guidelines that come out that are about, different ways of thinking about, like trauma-informed design, right? Like
There'll be metrics. More metrics, more on the social and policy side, maybe.
Yeah, like how can we just shout it from the rooftops, which we are all getting really good at this point because we just talk over each other.
We're talking about sustainability. We're talking about the built environment. So
everybody's
let's
talking
continue
about it.
having these open conversations.
The cultural and social
Yeah.
side, and maybe, how are we going to measure that now? I mean, it should be. It should be part of that language.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I think
I think we're going to take questions from the audience, although I'm not. Oh, here we go. Okay. So you guys are going to, I think there's a QR code.
I think
We might be
blocking
hiding it. Yeah.
I see it, but I guess, is it?
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay.
over there.
So I assume you're supposed to click on the code and then submit your question.
Oh, boy.
And I think
And while
we're going
those
to
are
read
coming
it.
in, I definitely just want to thank ASID for this opportunity,
Yes.
for Royce and I to take this and build
Shape
it
it,
into
shape it.
whatever it would become, because there were no walls. And for the 20 members of the collective, because the first call we're like, hi, this is what it is, and we don't know what it is. We don't know what it's going to become, but thank you for dedicating your time to this unknown. And they were all on the call going, okay. But it became something big and beautiful. And the relationships, you guys are still talking. You committed to another year. And we're going to be at Gather in Atlanta with the next topic, which we're not going to tell you what it is because it's super exciting. And we're developing it again. And there's new members that have come on, and they were on the first call going, what is this? We're like, just bear with us. It's fun.
You'll see,
And
you'll
these Miro boards each week that they build out, it's just fabulous and fascinating. So yeah, just brilliant minds and the open conversation between designers and manufacturers, that's been the just most amazing thing, I think, like you said, just allowing that open conversation, because Faraz and I like to talk about product, but we also just like to have great conversations that are about design and the built environment and not about product. So it's.
I can definitely say from being on the industry partner side, not on the practice side. I'm absolutely honored to be amongst so many talented, smart, forward-thinking people. Like, it's not often that we get to do things like this where we get to have that kind of dialogue, and everyone is so open and just like sharing all of their knowledge. Like, it's a really, really special thing that we were able to participate in that. So thank you guys, all of you for that. Like, it's just incredible experience, incredible experience.
All right, we have a question.
Yeah, we do.
What is one design suggestion you recommend as low-hanging fruit, or a suggestion of something to avoid that we can take away from this session?
I think just remembering to design spaces where people can come together. That kind of is inherent in this idea of connectivity, but places where people can come together, whether that's physically or hybrid, so the sort of technology component. But if that's not a part of the program that you're designing, how can you find ways to create those spaces for people to come together?
Donuts.
Yeah, food,
Food.
right?
Yeah.
Food always brings everyone together.
I think one other thing I would probably add too, and there's a little bit of bias from my side, but so Turf manufactures a lot of acoustic product, and one of the things that we had to realize is there's a lot of site bias in design, and so thinking about activating other senses as a way of kind of incorporating that throughout the design process is really important, right? We mentioned smells, but scents, touch.
In our showroom, it's about tactility.
That's all
Right.
of
No, I
everyone's
mean,
going to walk
yeah.
away from.
Yeah,
from
yeah.
this,
And
is
I think
smells.
being really considerate of not just the aesthetics of something, but how does your space sound? How does your space feel? Are you comfortable? And I think like those are really great, like low-hanging fruit pieces that you can just start looking at those individual elements.
Yeah.
All right, we have another question. When having this conversation with young designers or students, is there a perspective from them that you've appreciated or have found refreshing?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of them are here. It's amazing. Yes, it's the vibrancy. It's their wonderment, that they are passionate without even knowing yet what's coming down the line. So absolutely, and having them around me, that's the best part, is keeping me on my toes and keeping me remembering what it was like. I do often, that's how I kind of mentor and I teach, is I completely remember what it was like starting out in any job, and knowing that it's really important for them to have trust and to feel they can ask you anything, even though they may be uncomfortable, and their sense of humor and the fact that they teach me how to software things and a lot of that, and phone things, but just their vibrancy and their willingness to just kind of, at least with me or in a Canon, just to just dive in. It's fantastic.
I would say that younger designers are also so tapped into being inclusive of each other. And it's so refreshing just to see they're always trying to bring their colleagues along, their peers. How can we lift each other up? So that's been really refreshing just to see. It's so much more inherent, where I think we have to remind ourselves, who are we forgetting? Okay, that it's just so intuitive for them.
And I'm so impressed and emboldened by their bravery. I mean, I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until my junior year of college. And my mom was like, yeah, of course you are. But in the 80s, they were giving you kids really scary drugs. So I didn't want to get you, But people are showing up to their first roles out of school and saying, I am neurodiverse, and these are my basic human needs, right? And guess what? We have to accommodate them, because we should do that anyway, right? But it's like, I think we talked a lot about, it's really critical that you know how your team members, how your colleagues, how your clients even like to communicate and like to work together. Some people are auditory listeners. Some people, like me, I have to write everything down, and if it's not in my calendar, it's not in my brain. So knowing how people work best and how people prefer to be communicated with or to be followed up with, I think is such a simple question. Again, just like meeting somebody as human to human, how do you?
I didn't have that. In my first job.
Right? Yeah. No, none of us did. But it's so great that everybody is more open with here's who I am. I'm not afraid to tell you who I really am, but I'm super pumped to be here. So how can you help me thrive and do my best work? And as leaders, we really need to remember that we should be asking them those questions. It's not just, what can you do for me?
And how are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. But what can we do for you, and how are you doing as a person?
Yeah. Great. I think we have time for one last question. Or
I'm going to let you answer it. I mean, ask it, but I love how inclusivity and connectivity is with Q&A, because people don't have to be embarrassed or stand up with a mic now, and they use a QR code, and so they don't have to be embarrassed. We don't know who is asking them. I think right there, that's just technology. Okay, that's good.
And how can we intentionally weave in sustainability to our conversations with clients and stakeholders, developing buy-in for these initiatives, just like we are with inclusivity and strengthening communities?
Materiality-wise, we do this all the time. I mean, it's just bottom line now. I mean, I don't know if you could.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously bigger systems and there's a whole building component to it, but it's just baseline. And I have gone through with clients trying to get them away from a certain material to move to a different type of material, and sometimes it's a lot of legwork, and it does. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of research in how it performs, its life cycle, monetary. But really, we start just with good practice. It's now just kind of
Yeah.
Well,
I
and
think
the human health angle too. So it's I think it comes to the human side. I think that's your in.
Who's installing it? It's not just the end users, it's the people that are putting it into the building too.
I think it's hard though, because it's not just sustainability work, it's equity work.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's technology work, it's sensory work. And the way our current structure is for projects with all of our different phases, like designers don't necessarily have that built in to the way the AIA kind of standard practices are. So when I was practicing interior design, I felt that was very frustrating. Like you're expected to be an expert in all of these things, and yet we don't actually get paid for the time to do those things, like to implement equity into our work or to implement sustainability. It takes extra research and extra thought, right?
And
care.
but our material partners, I will tell you,
Yes.
that's a huge piece of how we get it. We bring them in. They'll meet with the client. They'll show research. They'll show data. They'll show an installation. Bring them in to show them how it's been installed in past buildings. So our industry partners are a huge piece of this sustainability.
That's when you train your reps, like be
That's right.
part of the conversation and
Early.
become part of the billable conversation.
Yeah.
Don't just, don't just come for a presentation. Have a seat at the table and become a billable conversation because it's part of that story.
I think from a manufacturer too, like something that we've had to navigate this over the last couple of years, but you have several firms that have been setting sustainability standards, right? So if your material, your product is not compliant with X, Y, and Z,
That's right.
you're not even considered. So I think that it's a responsibility or opportunity for those who are practicing to set those standards and force the hands of the manufacturers to follow suit, because our greatest threat is if we don't get spec'd, right? That's a direct hit for us.
I am really thrilled to see, especially I've heard it so many times this NeoCon. At first, I'll just take flooring as an example. For a long time, it was, well, we're coming out with this backing, and this backing is super sustainable, but I need to make sure that I remember to spec that specific backing, right? And now, like you're saying, it's just baseline.
Yeah.
And so it's great because it's already baked into the product. It's a beautiful product. It still performs just as it did. But every manufacturer that we're seeing right now in our industry are taking these huge strides to just bake in the sustainability as the product comes. So you don't have an option not to specify a more sustainable product. So I'm super excited about that.
I kind of want to yes and one of the things that you had as a takeaway, which was talking about like, it's the designer's responsibility to bring up the inclusivity, like when somebody asks, but I think it's almost like even when a client or manufacturer doesn't bring it up, like it's even more the responsibility to be able to like shepherd us as manufacturers or clients through that process, because it's hard for us to change unless we're being forced to, right? It's very comfortable to just kind of do what we've been doing. So
Yeah, and status quo, like a lot of manufacturers are built on the status quo. We've
It's a
had
big
this
machine,
machine
right?
for
Yeah.
30 years, right?
We're
We got to
just gonna
get
do it.
every penny out of that machine. Right?
your supply chain, whatever, right? Like however you deal with day-to-day business, it's hard to move.
So just like our Friday calls.
We're over.
Yes.
Respecting everybody's time, it is, I think, party on the mart. But on behalf of ASID, thank you for joining us. Thanks for the Buy 10 for the past year. It was awesome.
You guys
We
rock.
had an amazing time together. We had a lot of laughs. Evidently some tears. Like, I love that.
And our QR code is back
yeah.
up for the white
Please
paper.
download the white paper. I think you will really enjoy it. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yay.